Welcome to this exploration of one of the most controversial and fascinating figures in modern American history, Donald Trump. This is not just the story of his time as president, but the entire journey that shaped him. From a wealthy kid in Queens to the 45th President of the United States, this is a story about ambition, failure, comeback, and power. Whether you admire Trump or despise him, his story offers important lessons about American society, democracy, and human psychology. So let's start at the beginning, in the borough of Queens, New York, in 1946. Phase 1. Family Foundation, 1946 to 1960s. To understand Donald Trump, you must first understand his father, Fred Trump. And to understand Fred, you need to know where he came from. Fred Trump was born in 1905 in the Bronx to German immigrant parents, Frederick and Elizabeth. His father died when Fred was just 11 years old, leaving the family in financial difficulty. This early experience with poverty and vulnerability would shape Fred's entire approach to life and business. When he turned 21, Fred incorporated a company called E. Trump and Son, named for his mother Elizabeth, who legally started the company since Fred was too young to do it himself. During the Great Depression, when most businesses were collapsing, Fred Trump found opportunity in a basic need: affordable housing. He started small, building simple homes for working-class families in Queens and Brooklyn. His advantage came from buying land cheaply during the downturn and securing government-backed loans for housing projects. This strategy allowed E. Trump and Son to steadily expand from single-family homes to larger apartment complexes. By the 1940s, Fred's company had become one of the most prominent real estate developers in Queens and Brooklyn, laying the foundation for the Trump family's wealth. By the time Donald was born in 1946, Fred was already wealthy and successful. The Trump family lived in a large house in Jamaica Estates, Queens, not Manhattan, which was important. Queens was solidly middle and upper middle class, but it wasn't the elite world of Manhattan. The Trumps had money, but they weren't quite accepted by old money New York society. This would shape Donald's psychology profoundly, always feeling like he had something to prove to the Manhattan elite. Fred Trump did not only pass on his wealth to his children, but also his philosophy of life. The Trump family lived in a large house in Queens with many rooms and even a chauffeur, but the household was not always warm or nurturing in the traditional sense. Fred was known as a strict and practical father who valued discipline and competition. This approach left a strong mark on Donald Trump, shaping his mindset and style in the years to come. Fred constantly reminded young Donald of his core lessons: work hard, never show weakness, and always come out on top. Young Donald competed intensely for his father's attention and approval. He had a strong temper and often clashed with authority figures at school. Teachers described him as energetic, assertive, and sometimes disruptive. Concerned about his behavior and discipline, Fred Trump decided to send 13-year-old Donald to the New York Military Academy, a private boarding school in upstate New York. There, Donald found a structured and competitive environment with strict schedules, uniforms, and an emphasis on academics, athletics, and leadership. Surprisingly, he thrived, excelling in sports, rising to leadership positions, and channeling his aggression into ambition and drive. Surprisingly, for a rich kid who'd been expelled from regular school, Donald thrived at Military Academy. He excelled at several sports, particularly baseball. He was named captain of the baseball team his senior year. The yearbook called him a ladies' man. He seemed to flourish in the structured, hierarchical, competitive environment. Years later, Trump would credit his time at boarding school with teaching him the discipline he needed to succeed in business and politics. But what he really learned was how to channel his aggression into more socially acceptable forms. This is an important lesson about human development. Behavioral patterns formed in childhood don't usually disappear. They evolve. The aggressive child who bullied classmates became the aggressive adult who dominated business negotiations. The boy who couldn't admit mistakes became the man who never apologized. After graduating from Military Academy in 1964, Trump attended Fordham University in the Bronx for 2 years. Then he transferred to the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania. Wharton was prestigious, and Trump would later frequently mention his Wharton degree as evidence of his intelligence. He graduated in 1968 with a bachelor's degree in economics. Phase 2, Early Career, 1968 to 1970s. In 1968, Donald Trump joined his father's real estate company. He was 22 years old, college-educated, and eager to prove himself. But Fred wasn't about to just hand everything over to his son. The first few years weren't glamorous. Donald and Fred had to roll up their sleeves and turn around some housing projects in Brooklyn and Queens that were losing money. For Donald, it was an apprenticeship of learning the business from the ground up. In 1971, Donald Trump was named president of his father's company, which he soon rebranded as the Trump Organization. While the new title gave Donald a larger role and public visibility, Fred Trump remained firmly in control of the finances and major decisions. Donald still had much to prove before he could be considered the true head of the family business. One of Donald's first moves as president was symbolic but important. He rebranded the company. E. Trump and Son sounded old-fashioned, like a company from his grandfather's generation. A modern real estate business led by a young, dynamic entrepreneur needed a more glamorous name. So Donald changed it to the Trump Organization. It was a small change, but it represented something bigger. Donald was beginning to understand the power of branding and that the Trump name itself could become an asset. Unlike his father, who kept his office in Brooklyn, Donald shifted his focus to Manhattan. He moved into an Upper East Side apartment, began socializing at elite nightclubs, and worked to establish himself as part of the city's business and social scene. To most people, it looked like a young rich guy enjoying himself. But Trump was working. He was marketing his most important commodity, himself. It was around this time that Trump made his debut in another high-profile institution, the New York Times. The Times embodied the elite establishment that Trump both admired and resented. In the early 1970s, he was anxious for their attention and approval. But Trump's first major appearance in the New York Times came in 1973 for the wrong reason. That year, the Department of Justice filed a lawsuit against Donald, his father, and their company for alleged racial discrimination in housing practices. Investigators accused the company of turning away black renters while approving white tenants for the same apartments. The case drew national attention. Most lawyers advised Trump to settle quietly, but he soon met Roy Cohn, a notorious New York attorney known for his ruthless tactics. Cohn encouraged Trump not to back down, but to fight. He even filed a $100 million countersuit against the government, claiming harassment. The countersuit failed, but the aggressive strategy paid off. The final settlement allowed the company to continue without admitting wrongdoing. For Trump, it was an early lesson that would stay with him. Never admit guilt, always fight back, and always project strength. Roy Cohn became much more than Trump's lawyer. He became a mentor, a father figure, a role model. Cohn taught Trump to view every interaction as a zero-sum game where there were only winners and losers. Here's a critical warning that emerges from this period. Mentors have profound influence on how we see the world. A mentor with a sound ethical philosophy can help someone develop integrity and wisdom. But a mentor with a flawed, ruthless philosophy can create destructive patterns that last a lifetime. With Cohn's help and his father's money and connections, Trump secured his first major Manhattan project, transforming the old Commodore Hotel, next to Grand Central Station, into the Grand Hyatt. The Commodore was a decrepit hotel in a bad location, but Trump saw potential. More importantly, he saw a chance to prove himself to his father, to Manhattan society, to himself. With city tax breaks that Fred helped arrange, Trump renovated the hotel and reopened it as the Grand Hyatt in 1980. It was a success, and it established Trump's reputation as a developer who could execute major projects in Manhattan. But Trump wanted more. He didn't just want to be successful in his father's shadow. He wanted to build something his father had never built. He wanted to be somebody his father had never been. He wanted to conquer Manhattan in a way Fred, based in Brooklyn, never had. Phase 3. Success and Collapse, 1980s to 1990s. The 1980s were the perfect decade for Donald Trump. In this cultural moment, Trump went from being a real estate developer known mainly in New York to being a national celebrity, a symbol of 1980s capitalism. In 1983, Trump Tower was completed on Fifth Avenue. It wasn't just a building, it was a statement. The 58-story tower featured a 6-story atrium with pink marble walls, an 80-foot waterfall, and high-end retail stores. Trump's own penthouse apartment occupied the top 3 floors, decorated in gold and marble to resemble Louis XIV's palace at Versailles. Trump Tower put the Trump name on Fifth Avenue, the most prestigious address in New York. To Trump, this was the ultimate validation. He'd made it. He was no longer just Fred Trump's son from Queens. He was Donald Trump of Fifth Avenue. Trump expanded aggressively. He opened casinos in Atlantic City, New Jersey, which had recently legalized gambling. First the Trump Plaza, then the Trump Castle, then the Trump Taj Mahal, which Trump called the 8th wonder of the world. He bought the Eastern Airlines shuttle service and rebranded it Trump Shuttle. He bought a luxury yacht and named it Trump Princess. He bought the Plaza Hotel, one of New York's most iconic properties. In 1987, Trump published The Art of the Deal, which became a bestseller and further established his image as a master negotiator and deal-maker. The book was actually ghostwritten by journalist Tony Schwartz, who would later express deep regret about his role in creating the Trump myth. Trump's personal life also seemed perfect, at least on the surface. He'd married Ivana Zelničková in 1977. Ivana was a former competitive skier from Czechoslovakia. Together, they had 3 children, Donald Jr., Ivanka, and Eric. Ivana wasn't just a trophy wife. She was also a business partner, serving as an executive in the Trump Organization and managing the Trump Castle Casino. To many Americans watching from afar, Trump embodied the 1980s hyper-capitalist version of the American dream. He had it all: money, fame, beautiful wife, successful children, his name on buildings across the city. But beneath the glittering surface, Trump was building an empire on debt. His business model was inherently dangerous. Borrow the maximum amount possible, spend heavily on image and brand, and hope that property values and revenues rise enough to cover the debt service. This strategy is called leverage, and it works wonderfully when markets are going up. But it's catastrophic when they go down. And then at the beginning of the 1990s, the economy slipped into recession. The real estate market, which had been booming throughout the late 1980s, suddenly crashed. Consumer spending dropped dramatically. Trump's businesses, which were all dependent on discretionary consumer spending, started hemorrhaging cash. The Trump Taj Mahal opened in April 1990 with tremendous fanfare and celebrity performances. It had cost $1.2 billion to build, mostly financed with junk bonds carrying interest rates as high as 14%. The debt service alone was crushing. The casino needed to earn $1.3 million per day just to make the interest payments. It never came close. Within a year, the Taj Mahal filed for bankruptcy. But that was just the beginning of Trump's problems. His other two Atlantic City casinos, Trump Plaza and Trump Castle, also couldn't meet their debt obligations and filed for bankruptcy. The Trump Shuttle, which Trump had bought for $365 million with borrowed money, was sold at a massive loss. The Plaza Hotel was drowning in debt. His 282-foot yacht had to be sold. At the low point, Trump owed more than $3 billion personally. The banks had lent him so much that they could not afford to let him collapse entirely. Instead, they forced him to give up many assets and live under strict financial oversight. Reports at the time said Trump was put on a monthly personal allowance of about $375,000 to $450,000, a fortune to most, but humiliating for a man who had built his image on unlimited wealth. Trump's personal life also collapsed during this period. His marriage to Ivana had been deteriorating for years, but it completely fell apart when his affair with actress and model Marla Maples became a tabloid sensation. The New York tabloids, which had built Trump up in the 1980s, now gleefully tore him down. The divorce was brutal and very public. Ivana and Donald fought in the pages of newspapers and on television. Their prenuptial agreement entitled Ivana to $20 million, but after a bitter fight, they settled for less. In the end, Ivana received $14 million in cash, their 45-room mansion in Connecticut, an apartment in Trump Plaza, and the right to use their Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida for 1 month each year. Trump married Marla Maples in December 1993, 2 months after their daughter Tiffany was born. But this marriage was rocky from the start. They separated in 1997 and divorced in 1999, with Marla receiving $2 million in the settlement. During this dark period of the early 1990s, Trump's critics were delighted. Many of them had always suspected that Trump wasn't really the self-made genius he claimed to be. His problems seemed to prove them right. Trump's critics argued that he took such big risks because he knew he had a safety net that ordinary people don't have. If a normal person takes huge risks and fails, they lose everything and might end up homeless. If Trump took huge risks and failed, his father would bail him out, or the banks would be forced to bail him out because he was too big to fail. There's substantial truth to this criticism. Investigations later revealed that Fred Trump had given Donald and his siblings the equivalent of over $400 million in today's dollars, much of it through questionable tax schemes. Without this help, Trump would likely have gone personally bankrupt in the early 1990s. And in 1994, Trump faced his final humiliation. He had to give up the project he'd been chasing for nearly 2 decades. The West Side Rail Yards. But now, with his financial empire crumbling, Trump had no choice. In 1994, he sold the development rights to a consortium of businessmen from Hong Kong. The sale generated enough cash to help him avoid personal bankruptcy. But it felt like defeat, the final acknowledgement that he'd failed to achieve his biggest dream. This period teaches a crucial lesson. Unchecked ambition combined with poor self-control and excessive leverage is a recipe for disaster. Borrowing huge amounts of money to bet on image and brand rather than solid business fundamentals might work for a while, but eventually, when markets turn, it all comes crashing down. But Trump wasn't finished. In fact, what came next would be one of the most remarkable comebacks in American business history. Phase 4, the comeback, 2000s. Between approximately 1995 and 2000, Trump gradually recovered financially. How did he do it? First, he restructured his business debts. The casinos went through bankruptcy proceedings, which allowed them to shed debt and renegotiate with creditors at pennies on the dollar. Trump gave up most of his ownership stake in the casinos, but he kept his name on them and continued to receive management fees. This was actually brilliant from a business standpoint. He got paid without bearing the risk. Second, he fundamentally changed his business model. Instead of owning and operating buildings, hotels, and casinos, which required huge amounts of capital and carried significant risk, Trump increasingly focused on branding and licensing. Other developers would build buildings and take on the financial risk, and Trump would simply license his name to them for a fee. It was a much lower risk, higher margin business. Third, and perhaps most importantly, he controlled the narrative. In 1997, Trump published a book called The Art of the Comeback. It was essentially a 200-page victory lap, announcing to the world that he was back, that he'd overcome adversity, that he'd never really been as bad off as people thought. The book served multiple purposes. It generated income from sales, it shaped the narrative of his recovery, and it reminded everyone that Trump was a fighter who never gave up. He bought high-profile assets that generated enormous publicity. He purchased a 70-story office building at 40 Wall Street in Lower Manhattan for just over $8 million and renamed it the Trump Building. These weren't necessarily great investments from a pure financial return standpoint, but they were excellent for maintaining his public profile and keeping the Trump brand alive. And Trump learned a valuable lesson that would shape everything that came after. People love a comeback story. Americans in particular have a deep affection for the underdog who gets knocked down but gets back up. Trump had gone from being a symbol of 1980s excess to a cautionary tale of 1990s excess. And now he was becoming a symbol of resilience and determination. Around this time, Trump also started seriously considering a run for president. In 1999 and 2000, he flirted with running as the Reform Party candidate. Trump saw an opportunity. He was now one of the most famous people in America. He had near-universal name recognition. He formed an exploratory committee, went on talk shows, took a high-profile campaign swing to California, and vowed to spend $100 million of his own money to win not just the Reform Party nomination, but the presidency itself. He even published a book called The America We Deserve, outlining his policy proposals. Some of these would sound very familiar to anyone who followed his 2016 campaign. He advocated for a one-time 14.25% tax on the super wealthy to pay down the national debt. He wanted to get tough on trade with China and Japan. He expressed skepticism about U.S. military interventions overseas, and he proposed universal health care. Trump won the Reform Party's California primary in early 2000. It looked like he might actually win the nomination. But then, just as quickly as he'd entered the race, Trump dropped out. He announced that the Reform Party was self-destructing, due to infighting between different factions and that he couldn't win the presidency without a unified party behind him. But there was more to it than that. Even if the Reform Party had been unified, Trump knew that running as a third-party candidate meant he probably couldn't win the presidency. Then, in the fall of 2003, came the opportunity that would change everything and catapult Trump into an entirely new level of fame and cultural influence. A television producer named Mark Burnett, the man behind the massively popular reality show Survivor, came to see Donald Trump with an idea. He wanted to create a reality TV show about business. It would be about competition, tough decisions, and the harsh realities of the business world. Would Trump be interested in being the host? Trump thought it over and eventually agreed. On January 8, 2004, the debut episode of The Apprentice aired on NBC. The show was an immediate, massive hit. An average of 20 million people tuned in every week during the first season. The format was perfect for Trump. A group of contestants competed in business-related challenges, and at the end of each episode, Trump would sit in a boardroom, review their performance, and deliver his judgment. The losing team leader would be fired. Trump's signature catchphrase, "You're fired," became an instant cultural phenomenon. People quoted it at work. Comedians parodied it on late-night TV. It became one of the most recognizable phrases in American pop culture, right up there with "Show me the money" and "Make my day." NBC had originally planned to have rotating hosts for the show, but they quickly scrapped that idea and built the entire program around Trump. In the opening of the very first episode, Trump invoked his comeback story. "I was seriously in trouble. I was billions of dollars in debt. But I fought back, and I won big league. And as the master, I want to pass along my knowledge to somebody else. I'm looking for The Apprentice." Over 14 seasons as host of The Apprentice and its spin-off Celebrity Apprentice, Trump earned an estimated $400 to $500 million from salary, licensing deals, product placements, and other residuals from the show. But more important than the money was what the show did for Trump's image and brand. The Apprentice was a major step in Trump's transformation from being primarily a real estate developer to being someone whose main business was selling his own name. After the show became successful, Trump licensed his name to all sorts of products and ventures: Trump Steaks, Trump Wine, Trump Water, Trump University, Trump Cologne, Trump Ties, Trump Mattresses, Trump Board Games. Most of these products failed, but that was almost beside the point. They were all possible because of the success and visibility that The Apprentice provided. Trump also found personal stability during this period. In January 2005, he married for the third time to Melania Knaus, a Slovenian model nearly 25 years his junior whom he'd been dating on and off since 1998. In March 2006, they had a son, Baron William Trump. It was Trump's fifth child. But more than anything else, the years of The Apprentice were when Trump truly mastered something that would prove absolutely crucial for his political future: media manipulation and the creation of spectacle. Trump learned that controversy equals attention. Positive attention or negative attention didn't really matter. What mattered was staying in the conversation, staying visible, staying relevant. Reality TV was the perfect training ground for what would become his political theater. He discovered that the American public, or at least a significant portion of it, loved the archetype of the strong boss who doesn't apologize, doesn't back down, who tells people they're fired rather than gently letting them go. This character that Trump played on TV would eventually become the character he played in politics. Here's a critical lesson that emerged from this period, one that's vital for understanding not just Trump, but modern American politics. Media literacy is extremely important in a democratic society. When people can't distinguish between entertainment and reality, when they confuse a television character with an actual person, they become vulnerable to manipulation. Trump, the TV character, always confident, always successful, always in control, always winning, became Trump the brand. And eventually, Trump the brand would become Trump the politician. The only question was, when would he make that leap? And what would happen when he did? Phase 5. Politics and Presidency, 2011 to 2021. The year 2011 was a turning point. The United States was still recovering from the Great Recession. Barack Obama was president, and a backlash was brewing. The Tea Party movement had emerged in 2009, fueled by anger about government bailouts, spending, and what many conservatives saw as Obama's socialist agenda. But underneath the stated grievances about fiscal policy, there was something else. Many Americans, particularly white, working-class Americans, felt they were losing their country. They felt ignored, disrespected, left behind. And Donald Trump saw an opportunity. In February 2011, Trump spoke at CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference, a major gathering of Republican activists and politicians. He talked about how rich and successful he was, called other Republican candidates losers, and promised that if he ran for president, he'd win. But what really got attention was when Trump began questioning where Barack Obama was born. "Our current president came out of nowhere," Trump said ominously. This was the beginning of what became known as the birther movement, a conspiracy theory that Obama wasn't actually born in the United States and therefore wasn't eligible to be president. It was based on nothing but racial prejudice and paranoia, but Trump ran with it. He went on TV show after TV show demanding that Obama produce his long-form birth certificate. "There's something on that birth certificate that he doesn't like," Trump said on the Today Show. On Fox News, he declared, "I'm starting to think that he was not born here." On April 27, 2011, Obama finally released his long-form birth certificate, definitively proving he was born in Hawaii. But Obama didn't just release the certificate and move on. 3 days later, at the White House Correspondents' Dinner on April 30, 2011, he took his revenge. With Trump sitting in the audience, Obama delivered a humorous roast at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, joking about the birther controversy. He poked fun at Trump's obsession with the issue and used exaggerated, tongue-in-cheek references to other conspiracy theories and pop culture, while Trump remained in the audience, listening without publicly reacting. The room filled with journalists, celebrities, and politicians erupted in laughter. Trump sat there, not smiling, as everyone laughed at him. The humiliation was complete and very public. Many journalists, political analysts, even some of Trump's associates believed this moment was pivotal. The humiliation Trump experienced that night convinced him that he had to run for president. It wasn't primarily about policy or serving the country. It was about proving everyone wrong, about getting revenge on the coastal elites who had mocked him, about showing Obama and everyone else that they'd made a terrible mistake laughing at him. Trump didn't run in 2012. He pulled out of the race after the birther strategy backfired. But his interest in politics didn't fade. If anything, it deepened. Around this time, Trump met Steve Bannon, a former Goldman Sachs investment banker who had pivoted into right-wing media and become executive chairman of Breitbart News. The two men talked about China, trade deals, immigration, and the sense that America was in decline. Bannon helped Trump understand that these issues resonated deeply with millions of Americans who felt left behind by globalization and ignored by both political parties. Between 2012 and 2015, America continued to change. The media landscape became more polarized. Alternative news sources like Breitbart, along with countless blogs and social media accounts, spoke directly to Americans who felt mainstream media was lying to them. Trump took notice. He became increasingly active on Twitter, building a following of millions who loved his unfiltered combative style. Meanwhile, the Republican Party was evolving. In the 2014 midterm elections, Republicans won big, capturing the Senate and expanding their House majority. They won by talking about the issues Trump had been talking about: border security, crime, threats from China, government overreach. Many candidates won despite having net negative approval ratings. Voters didn't necessarily like them, but they liked what they were saying. Trump had always believed he could become president, but he'd never had the support from a major party he needed to actually win. Suddenly, by 2015, the conditions were right. Americans, especially Republicans, were willing to listen to increasingly aggressive solutions. The establishment was weak. Voters wanted fighters, not compromisers. And nobody had Trump's combination of celebrity, charisma, media savvy, and willingness to say absolutely anything. On June 16, 2015, Donald Trump descended an escalator at Trump Tower with Melania by his side. When he reached the podium, he announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, I am officially running for President of the United States, and we are going to make our country great again." His speech hit all his themes. The mainstream media treated his announcement as a joke. Political analysts dismissed him as entertainment. But Trump's campaign was deadly serious. He'd been planning for months, hired experienced staff, and kept advisors like Roger Stone and Steve Bannon close. His advisors suggested talking about a border wall as a reminder to discuss immigration. But Trump took it literally. "We will build a great wall along the southern border, and Mexico will pay for it." The wall became one of his campaign's most enduring symbols. Trump turned the Republican primaries into reality television. He insulted opponents with nicknames: Low Energy Jeb, Little Marco, Lion Ted. At the first debate, when asked about calling women fat pigs and disgusting animals, he didn't apologize, he doubled down. He said outrageous things that should have ended his campaign but instead gained him support. His supporters didn't care about traditional political rules. They rewarded him for fighting back against what they saw as politically correct culture. "I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters," Trump said in January 2016. It was shocking, but it captured a truth. His supporters backed him because of his controversial statements, not despite them. Trump didn't win Iowa, he came second to Ted Cruz. But he won New Hampshire, Nevada, South Carolina. One by one, opponents dropped out. By July 2016, Trump had secured the Republican nomination. Now came the general election against Hillary Clinton. Serious people expected Clinton to win easily. She had more experience, money, better organization, establishment support. But Trump had something else: an ability to dominate news cycles and an intuitive understanding of what energized voters. Then came October 2016 and two major developments. First, on October 7th, the Washington Post published the Access Hollywood tape showing Trump making degrading comments about women. Critics thought this was finally the end. Some Republicans withdrew endorsements. People on Trump's team suggested he drop out. But Trump did what Roy Cohn taught him 40 years earlier. He attacked. He issued a brief apology but immediately pivoted. Before the second debate, he held a press conference with women who'd accused Bill Clinton of sexual assault, then brought them to the debate itself. The strategy worked. Instead of weeks of coverage about the Access Hollywood tape, people talked about Trump's audacity and Bill Clinton's past. Second, 11 days before the election, FBI Director James Comey announced the FBI was reopening its investigation into Hillary Clinton's private email server. The timing devastated Clinton's campaign. Still, on election night, November 8, 2016, almost everyone expected Clinton to win. Trump himself wasn't expecting victory. Then history happened. Florida went for Trump, then Ohio, then North Carolina. The blue wall, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, all flipped to Trump. At 2:30 a.m., the Associated Press called Pennsylvania, putting Trump over 270 electoral votes. Despite losing the popular vote by nearly 3 million, Trump won the Electoral College. The man nobody thought would run, nobody thought would win the nomination, and almost nobody thought would win the election had pulled off one of history's greatest upsets. On January 20th, 2017, Donald Trump was sworn in as the 45th President of the United States. His presidency was controversial from day one. Trump pursued his agenda: tax cuts favoring corporations and the wealthy, 3 Supreme Court appointments, tariffs on Chinese goods, immigration restrictions including the Muslim ban, withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement and Iran nuclear deal. His presidency was marked by constant investigations. The Mueller investigation examined Russian interference in 2016. While finding extensive contacts between Trump's campaign and Russian officials, it didn't establish criminal conspiracy. However, it explicitly didn't exonerate Trump on obstruction of justice. In December 2019, Trump was impeached over Ukraine, allegations he pressured President Zelensky to investigate Joe Biden. The Senate acquitted him in February 2020. Then came COVID-19. The pandemic killed over 1 million Americans and crashed the economy. Trump's handling became a major campaign issue, downplaying severity, resisting lockdowns, promoting unproven treatments, undermining health officials. In November 2020, Trump lost to Joe Biden. But Trump refused to concede. He claimed, without evidence, massive voter fraud. He filed dozens of lawsuits. Courts dismissed them all, including judges he'd appointed. His attorney general said there was no fraud that would change the outcome. Trump's refusal culminated on January 6, 2021. After Trump told supporters to fight like hell, or "You're not going to have a country anymore," a mob stormed the Capitol. The attack resulted in 5 deaths, injured over 140 officers, and for hours the seat of American democracy was occupied by rioters carrying Trump flags. Trump was impeached a second time for incitement of insurrection. Again, the Senate acquitted him, though 7 Republicans voted to convict. Some analysts view Trump's inability to accept defeat as consistent with lifelong patterns. Admitting loss would threaten his core identity built on winning, never admitting defeat, always coming back. Here's a critical warning. When unresolved psychological patterns meet unlimited power, consequences can become national crises. Democratic institutions are more fragile than we think. So why did Trump run for president? Some analysts suggest he wanted to prove something to his deceased father, get revenge on elites who mocked him, prove he could do the impossible, achieve ultimate validation for lifelong insecurity. Observers note controversial methods, creating divisions, making people doubt reality, attacking institutions while claiming to protect them, demanding personal loyalty over institutional loyalty. But Trump supporters see these same behaviors as confidence, straight talk, challenging corruption, expecting basic loyalty. Trump is a Rorschach test. People see what they're predisposed to see. Trump's story raises profound questions. What role should media play in democracy? What psychological qualities should we seek in leaders? His rise shows that institutional safeguards are fragile. Celebrity can substitute for experience. Many voters were desperate for change, and social media has fundamentally altered politics. Trump changed American politics permanently. He proved you don't need political experience to win the presidency, traditional rules can be ignored, and many voters value authenticity over expertise. Trump hasn't really changed since childhood. Insecure, yet grandiose. Hungry for approval, yet contemptuous of critics. Obsessed with winning and terrified of losing. One final note. This account is based on documented events, but interpretations will always vary. Some view Trump as a leader who challenged the political establishment, while others see him as someone who capitalized on division. Some consider him a successful businessman, while others emphasize the support and wealth he inherited. What is certain is that Trump's story is not finished. He continues to play a significant role in American politics, and the forces that shaped his rise remain influential. His presidency will be examined for years to come, prompting important discussions about power, democracy, media, truth, and leadership. Thank you for following along. I encourage you to reflect critically, to consider different perspectives, and to engage thoughtfully with others. The future of democracy depends not only on leaders, but also on the ways citizens participate, interact, and seek understanding. Do you want to know another story about famous people? Drop it in the comments below and we'll discover together.